So we've successfully fetched our API data. We've parsed it into from the JSON text into JavaScript object, and then we take that JavaScript object, which will be contained here, and actually display the data. I don't think JSON actually. I don't think it's a good name for it now that I look at it. It's actually the JavaScript object. So then display data. So this is where the action is for us in terms of translating the JSON that we got from the server into HTML elements, or not HTML elements, really DOM elements. Remember, this is DOM manipulation that JavaScript is doing, document object model. So recall, HTML is turned into the document object model by the browser, and then JavaScript interacts with it. And originally, it'd be primarily HTML, and still is a lot of times. But JavaScript would then be playing around the edges of that. Turning things gray to disabling them or enabling them, make an element visible. Here, it's much more radical, right? JavaScript is creating almost the entire document object model that the user's seeing, with the shell HTML being delivered initially and then JavaScript taking over. That's what we're going to see in modern JavaScript, so good, keep that in mind. So we take our data, and it's for each loop. So data is going to come to us in an array, and we'll look more into the data later. But it's going to come to us in an array, and for each is a JavaScript array method that will, JavaScript has, Java has a very similar one, where it'll do a callback method with each individual object. So the object is going to be called movie here. Remember, this is a function parameter for our arrow function. And then we'll go about creating elements in the DOM. So a document.create element div, very similar to what we initially did for the image element that's at the top of this page. So we create an element div, set attribute class and card. So the div element has a class of equal to card, and that's called out in the CSS, and that makes it appear to be a card, basically a square element with some text in the middle. And we have an H1 element being created here. We create an element. This is a DOM element, like a node on a tree. It's a document. It creates the node, and then we set the title from the data that we fetched here, movie.title. And then we'll create a paragraph element and then put the movie description. We'll take the first 300 text strings of the text characters of the string and make a substring out of it, and then put ... at the end. This is using actually string interpolation in JavaScript. I think we may have touched on this in the past. Good to review it if we haven't. Use backticks here. Backtick. That's the key above on the left above. And that tells JavaScript to do that string interpolation may be in play. So it takes a special look at the string, and it looks for $signs with curly braces. And then within that, it's looking for an object name, right? Movie.description in this case. And that's what's going to put in the text content for this paragraph element. Right? So now we have H1 the card and the H1 and the paragraph being created, and they're kind of just floating there. They're objects that have been created, 3 independent objects. Now we're going to tie them together, right? Container dot append child. Remember what a container was? It's the initial get element for the entire div at the top of the document. So append a child to the container, and then that child is one of these cards that just got created that has the movie title and the header and the paragraph in it. So we append that, and then append the child onto the card itself, the H1 tag, and the paragraph. So the card itself was an independent element, and that's been attached to the container as a node. Remember, this is an inverted tree. So within the card, it has a child of H1 and paragraph. So card on the outside, inside of a container, then H1 and paragraph inside of that. So how do we know what's in this data, and how do we know this? Let's back up a little bit here for our data. How do we know this? Why is it movie, and why are we treating it like an array? Well, this goes back to analyzing. This is some trial and error. But remember back when I made the original the API call in the browser, right? This is identical API call here. It's hiding, there we go, HTTP, same thing. So this is the JSON that's come back to us. And look what Let's read it a little bit. It's an array. It's an array of objects. And then inside that we have objects that have properties. And that's what's matching here, right? So we call this movie. That's our name for it, but it's a reasonable name for it. This is probably movies, but it doesn't. It's an anonymous array. None of these have array names. We're basically putting pasting a name on it. And in fact, movie, right? First movie. That's right here. And then within that movie, it has a dot title, and it has a description, dot description. It has some other things in it too. People that were in the movie, species, locations, vehicles, URL. These are arrays within this, and you can expand this out, right? If you wanted to show the director, the release date, sorted by RT score, and other things. So this is one movie. All the information you can show about this movie. We're only pulling out two pieces of information here. And this is going to traverse through this, and this is what this is doing here. This is traversing each one of these objects here and displaying it on the screen. So mine looks like this when it's finally done, when I have the image at the top. And because I did it twice, I did it the way that was shown in the tutorial, the older way to do it. And then the modern fetch API, I have the list in here twice. So castle in the sky. So it's adding elements here, so it adds it again, and it goes through it again. Same list, same information, just fetched it a little bit differently. So one other thing to say about this, an excellent article on javascript.info. Again, I've talked about this before. I think it's the best overall, basically an online textbook for JavaScript. If you printed it out, probably be 1,000 pages or so. Very rich examples here. So javascript.info on fetch, and then remember that response.json. That was how we took the response body that came back to us from the server and turned it into our data. But we also have these available methods to get response body, things that are built into the response to turn it into different things. We expect this text stream, expect form data, a blob. For example, we're downloading an MP3 file that may come down to us as a blob or someone's photograph, an array, and various things. So very flexible. Also in this article here, where you're going to have to do, so in order to do, this tutorial example that we've gone through is going to evolve into the beginnings of our Uno live game. In fact, that's what milestone 2 is going to be about. So you'll need to do posts and puts. So there's articles here or help here on puts. Let's find one. Here's a post. Here's a post. So remember that if you're doing, that's not what I want to. So here I found it. So some kind of blob thing, that doesn't matter. Here, fetch, this is our URL. Remember, if we're doing a get, you don't have to do options, but since we're doing a post, here it is. So you have a method and a post body. You have method post and the body blob. We'll find out how to do that. So this is useful to look at. Also, reconsider what you've done in Postman. It's very similar to this. Very similar. The data is the same. Right, so just another client, Postman. So we're another client from our API standpoint. They're the same, Postman and our JavaScript. They address it the same, and the responses and all that are the same. All right. So thanks, and the next time we revisit this, we're going to get into our actual Uno game. Thanks.